All right, welcome back to the newest episode of the HarPodcast. We're back after a bit of a hiatus, and we are so thankful to be joined today by someone who has spent a lot of time, not just in the last few weeks, but the last couple of years, for example, putting so much effort towards such a great cause. Joining me today is Patrick Singh, the founder of the Ernie Punch McLean Legacy Foundation. Patrick, appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join me here today.
Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, first off, Patrick, again, my sincere condolences to you on the passing of Ernie Punch McLean, someone who a lot of people know meant so much, not just to the Lower Mainland community here, the sports world in general. First of all, we know how much he meant to the broader community, but you yourself, you lost, you've mentioned before that you lost a close friend. How would you describe your relationship with Punch beyond hockey?
Like you just stated, a lot of people knew Punch as a sports figure and a person who'd been in the media for a long time. But for me personally, you are right. I got to know him as a friend. And that's who I miss, the legendary stories. That's one thing. But when you get to make a friend like that, when you get close to somebody, and I joke around all the time, I've probably seen that guy more than I see my own kids. Whenever he was stuck for a ride or anything happened, Punch was the first guy that, I'd be the first guy that he'd call. So yeah, we all miss him. There's a community in Coquitlam where Ernie's lived for the longest time. We're all in the same boat. I used to go work out at the pool where Ernie does the sauna and the steam room. And everyone, I mean, I regretted the first day that I had to walk in. There was 1,000 questions but yeah, he's sorely missed. He will be missed. He's just, like I said, not just the sporting issue of it, like aspect of the whole thing, but just a community member, just the way he had time for everyone. He could sit there, even people he didn't know, he'd be always just talking to, any stories. He had time for everyone. That's the kind of guy he was. Right. So he'll be sorely missed that way. The hockey community, that's another thing. They're going to miss him too. He had time for any event. He wasn't paid for these things that he'd pop by, the last thing we went to was about a month ago. We went to an event at Queen's Park Arena. It was a collegiate final between two hockey teams and college teams from Victoria. And again, there was Ernie front and center, just, spending his own time.
Patrick, for people who know the name but maybe not the full story, who was Ernie Punch McLean and why did he mean so much to everyone around him?
Ernie Punch McLean was born in Estevan, Saskatchewan. I think I'm 31, 32, like right in the middle of the Great Depression. And I think what he learned growing up in such a tough generation and such a tough time and era where starvation was everyday common thing with lack of food and everything. That work ethic and that steely determination to carry on and fight through those trials and tribulations that him and his family had gone through carried that man and was pretty much embedded in his DNA. He ended up coming across, moving. He reminds you a lot of Al Davis. I don't know if you sports fan know who Al Davis is. He used to own the Raiders. Bit of a maverick. I mean, it takes a lot of guts or cojones to actually move a team from Estevan, Saskatchewan to British Columbia, especially when there was no teams on the West Coast at that time. I don't know what the league must have thought of that, but that's what he did. Ernie was the kind of guy who had instilled in him that work ethic due to the harsh environs and climate that he grew up in, and he carried that to with him, and that made him a stronger person. And that not only reflected in his personality, but the teams that he put on the ice. Again, I don't want to keep repeating myself. I said this 1,000 times. A lot of people in today's generation will not get that style of hockey. It was a different time, a different generation, and a different culture. And in the professional leagues, again, repeating myself, but in the professional leagues, if you've seen the teams that were successful at that time, whether it be the New York Islanders, the Boston Bruins, the Philadelphia Flyers, or even the Montreal Canadiens, there was a certain element of grit and toughness that led these teams to, the Stanley Cup Finals and eventually winning the Stanley Cup Finals. And Ernie emulated that. He tried to get his players in a state of conditioning mentally, physically, to play that style of hockey. That's who Ernie was. He was able to adapt to the style of hockey at that time. And again, it's different from today, but Ernie kept up with his contemporaries in that, in that department, 100%.
When you founded the Ernie Punch McLean Legacy Foundation, what made you feel like his story deserved to be preserved for the future generations?
Well, again, it's kind of a convoluted story because it was a long time ago that Ernie had done these things, and he had never really asked for any recognition. He wasn't the kind of guy going out banging his own drum. But now that you've seen his legacy, and a lot of people recently, especially, have seen what his team's accomplished, there seemed to be a bit of recognition in regards to what he'd actually done, and not just on the ice. I think civically in New Westminster, what he meant to that city, what he contributed to that city. At that time, Canucks had just entered the league and they were floundering, but that arena was packed, completely packed. It was a raucous, rowdy building, and that was because of Ernie. Ernie livened that building up. So he meant a lot, not just to the hockey community, but also to the city of New Westminster and what he was able to bring to that city.
You've talked about making sure Punch could see his impact celebrated in real time. Why was that important?
Well, Punch, in a way, did kind of realize what he'd done and the kind of legacy he left for that city, and we wanted him to witness that. So 2 days before his passing, we had that press conference, which was kind of bittersweet. And I've made a statement a couple of times. I think at that press conference, you could tell he kind of knew the way things were going to go. He knew the statue was, we were making an effort for that. And I had told when I first started the Legacy Foundation and had the desire to get the statue done, a lot of people, especially within the media and just locally, said it sure would be nice to get this done while Ernie was around so he could see it. Unfortunately, 2 days after that press conference, again, I think you could see with a little glint in his eyes that he was happy and he could see that something was happening, something was set in motion. He was gone. So it was important for us to get this done beforehand. But like I've said before, Ernie may not be here anymore, but legends never die. And Ernie was truly a legendary character.
You talk about Queens Park Arena, it's safe to say that was the house that Ernie built. Why was a place like Queens Park Arena such an important location to both Punch McLean and, his legacy?
I've said that a few times. That is the house that Punch built. I mean, with all respect, now the Salmon Bellies have had quite a run of success in New Westminster, so you have to give them their dues, and rightfully so. But back then, Ernie was probably, and the Bruins were the main tenants of that building. There's stories of teams, talk to so many people, and I asked Ernie a few times, I said, well, what's it like for teams to be coming in knowing what they're going to be in for? What kind of battle, what kind of physical test we're going to be in for? And Ernie used to say the same thing. He said, Pat, they'd be shaking in their boots by the time they cross Patullo Bridge. Talked to Mark Lofthouse the other day. He was one of Ernie's favorite guys to go to in regards to media, and he was from New Westminster. Asked him the same thing. I said, well, what was it like? I said, Pat, he goes, after the players got off the bus, he goes, the bus was still shaking. So it just gives you a sense of idea. I mean, again, it was a different time. I was as a younger teenager, I'd go to Queens Park Arena and you'd pull up, or you'd go walk up to the front doors. There'd be Harley Davidsons parked outside. You open the door and it'd be just steam coming off the walls and the windows, and the stale, smell of cigarettes and beer. Everything's sanitized these days. It's not like that anymore. It was a lot different, and it meant a lot to the city. I think it was intimidating for the players to come in there and play because the fans were just rabid. If there was nothing going on, Ernie would stir the pot, and sure enough, it would kick off.
You got to know Punch very well throughout your time, obviously being around him, getting to know him a lot more. But as we've seen the tributes continue to file in, there's been a lot of stories shared by different players, different coaches, and different fans as well. Have any of those stories that have been told surprised you in a sense?
Can't really say anything surprises me about Ernie Punch, Mr. McLean. Like I said, it's such a legendary character. There's so many stories, whether it was junior hockey, minor hockey. I mean, you got some favorite stories always, taking Wayne Gretzky to the World Juniors as a kid. And, the picture I have of him, it's been all over the place too, of like him and Gordie Howe together. He was nothing that he did really surprised me. I mean, from running onto the ice and going after that one player, the videos all over the place too about him attacking that player who was mocking his a Bruins player who had lost his eyesight, and the goalie was walking around like a blind man. Nothing was beyond the scope for Ernie. If it meant loyalty to his team, he'd be out there. Whether it's throwing the garbage can, which was one of his favorite moments that he's ever accomplished. He loves that photograph. He loved that photograph. So there was nothing that surprised me that he's done. Like it was all about his team and all about getting the fans in the seats going.
Talking about his impact on the sport of hockey, Punch coached over 100 different NHL players. What was different about Punch that made him different as a coach?
I think what separated him from most guys at that time was Ernie realized the style of hockey that was being played by the pros that time, and he tried to mold his players and formulate the players that he was bringing through to fit that style. You got players all over the place that played for Ernie. You got Barry Beck. He was it first or second draft pick overall. He knew what it took to get into the NHL at that time. And I always have this question about Ernie and the style that he played. Did Ernie emulate the NHL at that time, or did the NHL emulate Ernie? I mean, you got to think about that. You got these players, these Bruins, these Flyers are coming in, and these tough, mean players. And you got the New Westminster Bruins. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Sometimes I think these NHL teams saw what was happening with the youth players out on the West Coast, or even some teams back east, the style they were playing, and maybe they. Again, you're going to get a lot of detractors. I've had a lot of people comment about what Ernie's style was, and they don't agree with it. But again, you have to go to the fact that it was a different society, a different culture, and a different time, and a different generation. And Ernie fit that style and generation perfectly for back then.
We hear about Punch's wins. We hear about the championships too. Of course, no major shortage of accolades for what Punch has done in the sport of hockey. But what separated Punch as a leader in that locker room?
I think what separated him as a leader was that his players respected him. He'd go out on a limb for them, no matter what it was, whether it was, having to talk to the referees or pull the wig off a referee once too. Whatever it took for him to show his players that he supported them. And it was funny. It was really ironic. I took Punch to see a game at New Westminster Arena probably about a year ago. My nephew was playing. At the time, he was probably about 12 years old. And Ernie just automatically walked into the locker room to give a little pep speech, right? And that's just the guy he was. His famous quote was, that guy sitting next to you, he tell the players to turn around and look at the player next to him. And he said, look at that player. That player sitting next to you, that's your brother. That's your brother. He just knew how to get to the boys. They were a family, Those were his boys. Even his wife, Fran, she called the New Westminster Bruins her boys. There was a sense of leadership, of like a family, a bond that Ernie expressed, and Ernie wanted to basically make the players believe that they were a family. They were tight. They were close together, right?
I myself never got to meet Ernie's late wife, Fran, but from the photos that I've seen, the stories that I've heard, they weren't just married to one another; they were best friends. They did everything together. From what you can recall about their relationship, how big of a part did Fran play in Ernie's life and his coaching career?
She was an integral part. Fran was an integral part of Ernie's life. She went through the trials with him, up and down, with everything they went through. She was there for him. Ernie had great love for Fran from the time that she passed, away to even when he before he was gone. He expressed a love for her. He'd always told me, Pat, today's a different generation. People get separated, people get divorced. But Ernie told me, he goes, that girl that I married, that girl that I knew when she was 16, 17, whenever he met her, was that same girl that was there till the day she died. Ernie was a loyal person, not just to his team, but to Fran, and he dearly loved her. And again, she called the Bruins her boys. It was like a family relationship, not just between her and Ernie, but also between the team. that bond like that will never get broken, right? It's amazing what she meant to him and what he meant to her. They were just together till right till the end. Even though she was gone, Ernie carried her memory around forever. He loved her dearly.
Great segue into my next question. Pat, you became close with Punch personally. What was Ernie like away from the rink?
Oh, he is a mischievous little character. I used to call him Dennis the Menace. He was always, you could never ever, for example, this one time I was writing a song, the Ballad of Punch McLean. It's on YouTube. Check it out, by the way. So I was at the pool, and I had just started to get to know Ernie after I'd approached him and write the song. So I'd walked up to Ernie. He wanted to know how the song was going. So I walked up to Ernie and said, "Hey, Ernie, by the way, the song's almost finished. It's going quite well." He said, "Okay, good." And he goes to walk away. He says, "Hey," and he turns around and looks at me and goes, "You remind me a lot of me." And I said, "What was that?" He goes, "What?" I said, "What'd you say?" He goes, "Did I say something?" And he just gives you that dead eye stare. He was just like that. When Ernie looked at you and he wanted to say something, you didn't know whether you were losing your mind. He was just a mischievous character. He loved to play. He just loved to joke around. Again, what kind of person was he? He had time for everyone. At the pool was a common meeting place for us because I'm busy, he is busy. But in regards to progress for the foundation of the video, we'd meet at the pool. Everyone and their dog knew Ernie. They knew who he was, and it was just the kind of guy he was all around, the community of even Coquitlam where we used to hang out. He was a legendary character. When I first met him, I was one of these fans that was kind of like knew who he was, see him everywhere all around town, but never really knew him that well. It's just when I started to work on that song for him was when I really, like I said, I've used this line 1,000 times. How do you walk up to a man and ask him if you can write a song about him? And I did that. And once that happened, we got to get, be a lot closer. We developed a bit of a bond after that. But amazing fellow, amazing. Like I said, wherever we went, I used to go to hockey games with him, and he'd sit in the press box. People on the SkyTrain everywhere just wanted a picture. They knew who he was. It's just like I used to joke around all the time. I said, "Ernie, I can't take you anywhere." It's like Beatlemania, he's getting mobbed by everyone. That's the kind of guy he was. He was loved by everyone, right?
Everyone has heard stories, and we talked about this earlier too. The garbage can moments, the fiery moments. But what side of Punch did people not always get to see?
Phew, there was this side to him that was very caring. I mean, for example, it's kind of hard to talk about, but we there's a podcast out there he did with my friend Raj, and he talked about racial injustice, and and for somebody from his generation, it probably would have been hard to talk about because you have to keep your lip zipped. But he expressed the fact that the black community back then couldn't live their lives because of persecution and whatever. Ernie, was he stood up for what he believed in. If he saw injustice, he kind of spoke against it. He was always, for like, the underdog. He was just, whenever he seen kind of injustice, whether it's politically or even in social media or the news or anything like that, he always felt that he'd always stuck up for the little guy. It's just a kind of not a lot of people saw that side. They saw this tough image and the teams that he coached, but there was a side to him that always stood up for the little guy. And yeah, that's one side to him. What else didn't I see about him? He was a very generous person with his time. I mean, maybe that's something people did see. He had time for everyone. He was an open book. What you saw is what you got. But like I said, I saw a side to him that was a mischievous little. I had a nickname, Dennis the Menace, because he could lead you around the garden path. He'd tell you a story, or he'd say something, and he'd like wink at the guy beside you. He's got one on you. So I used to call him Dennis the Menace because sometimes you just didn't know where he was coming from, and that was his sense of humor.
Oh, that wink. I can attest to that. Having been to Vancouver Giants games myself, covering those in the press box, whenever I used to have a conversation with Punch, there would be at least one time in that conversation where he'd have that wink when making a joke. You talked about presenting the song to Ernie Punch McLean when you guys first met. What would you say made you and Punch click as friends, Patrick?
Well, I think when I first approached him with that song, he probably thought, yeah, okay, what's this guy talking about? So when I played it to him, he really loved it. I mean, there's a line in that song. It's hard to put the man's life story in a tell the man's life story in a 3 minute song. That's actually a line from that song. So I think Ernie kind of saw what I had done in trying to preserve his life in 3 minutes, which is impossible to do. But I tried my best and I put the song together. So when I played the song for him, it was really funny. We played it on a Friday at my place. So right off the bat, he calls up Donnie and Dolly on the Donnie and Dolly TV show, and he tries to play the song over the speaker on the TV. I'm like, just to get them. He was so happy with the song, right? So I said, no, it's Ernie. Ernie, that's okay. I'll send him a copy. I'll send him a copy. But so what I did is, we did end up sending them a copy. But he used to, whenever we'd go somewhere, or we're at the pools, there's some people obviously who don't know who Ernie Punch McLean is, the younger people. He'd always say, go check out my YouTube video. I got a song written about me. So yeah, we kind of developed a bond that way. It was just something I wanted to do. I mean, the guy's story, it's like a legend, It's like you can't write this stuff up. It's so Canadian. It's like Canadiana, what he's done, what he's accomplished, not just that, the things he survived. There's a song and a movie waiting to happen, and I'm trying to work on both. So it was an amazing character. You just had to, you can't really believe what he's been through. You can't really imagine what he's been through, but it's true. And that's where the legendary aspect of it comes in, right?
Good friend of mine, Steve Erickson, once told me, there was a story about Punch where even to this day, he recently was still going to Vancouver Canucks games. And, when the Detroit Red Wings or the Tampa Bay Lightning came to town this one year, I remember him telling me a story of Scotty Bowman was in town. And obviously, Punch had quite the connection with Scotty Bowman. So when Ernie Punch McLean would go downstairs to the locker room, he asked, "Is Scotty there?" And normally we know how tight security and everything is in the game, but Scotty knew if Punch was there, he would instantly tell Punch, "Come on in, go to the locker room." He still remembered after all those years who Punch was. So in my opinion, I think that's just so cool that Punch's reach wasn't just, here. It didn't just stay in BC. Those connections that he made, I think they evolved to stay with people no matter where or, how far they got in their careers. Was that sort of the individual that Punch was, that once you've met him, the impact that he makes on you stays with you lifelong?
100%. Again, people think just locally when they think of Ernie Punch McLean, but what he did on a national level, absolutely incredible. He had so much respect. I've attended a few games with him where I'd sit in a press box, and he went to this one game. I wasn't able to make it. It was against Toronto. He went down to the locker room and talked to Craig Berube, the Toronto coach. And Craig Berube, I believe, had a little stint with the Bruins, or might have played against the Bruins one time. I forget, but there was a lot of respect and love for him. It's just absolutely amazing. Again, not like you said, not just within US Minster, not just between the WHL, but just the whole entire NHL. There's a story that I think Farhan had mentioned at the press conference that when they're trying to budget and cut down the amount of people that are sitting in the press box, and they saw when Jim Rutherford was trying to decide what to cut back in regards to expenses, somebody mentioned that, yeah, this is Punch's chair in the press box. I said, that chair is not going anywhere. He's got that seat for as long as he wants. And it was funny because whenever I go to a hockey game with Ernie, he'd kind of venture down to the visiting team's locker room like he was at home there. That was his home. And, I'm kind of new in the saying I didn't want to go walk. I don't know, that's like beyond my scope. So I wait for Ernie to come out. But yeah, Ernie felt comfortable. And the press, the media, and not just that, the general managers, it was just amazing the outreach the man had and the respect he had, that he was able to talk to anyone and everyone in the NHL regardless. Again, it shows you the amount of level, the level of respect people had for Ernie. He was just like that. He was like, even after generation, like years after that, years after the Bruins, that respect from everyone in the NHL, from GMs to coaches, has been there. It's just has not gone away, right?
There's a lot of great stories about Punch, but I can't help but think back to 2009 when Punch was obviously, he loved mining. He loved being in the mountains. In 2009, obviously Punch goes missing. When he was up there mining. Days later he was obviously found. And I remember hearing about a story where, when people asked Punch, Punch, where were you? We couldn't find you. He was like, I wasn't lost. They just couldn't find me. That was, those were the words that he says. He's like, I know where I was going. People just didn't know where I was at. So I think, my question here, the general question that I have here is, we knew Punch as someone who stood on business. It was either my way or the highway with Punch because he believed in what he said. You could see that from his coaching right until his final days as well. Uh, how strong of a character was Ernie Punch McLean in standing on business and, not taking no for an answer?
Like I said, if you know anything about sports, you know who Al Davis is. And I shouldn't keep mentioning Al Davis. I used to be an Oakland Raiders fan, but I find it very similar, like in the ways of being a maverick in what he did. He went to be able to take a team from Estevan, Saskatchewan, to move them to the West Coast, knowing there's no teams on the West Coast. What is the league gonna? How are they going to deal with that? All of a sudden now they've got a real threat that they've got to send all their teams across the Rockies to play in Vancouver. That showed his stance, what kind of character he had to be able to stand up and make a bold move like that. His plane crash, his accidents, the plane crash, losing an eye, basically crawling, stuffing his eye that's hanging out back in his eye socket and wrapping a t-shirt around it to survive and to try and get help, and then surviving 5 days in the woods. There was a lot of times when the New Westminster Bruins got a lot of flack to, again, because the style of hockey they played and the style they played. Ernie stuck to his guns. He was like that. And again, it goes back to being raised where he was, I believe, in Estevan. I know there's a different stock. He came from a different generation back then, especially that part of the world. I think Ernie earned his stripes, his toughness and his integrity growing up where he did in Estevan. That made him a stronger person going through what he did. I can't imagine. I mean, there's stories people don't know what Ernie had gone through as a youth, growing up in that poverty-stricken time during the Depression, and I think that made him a tougher person, ready to battle whatever was thrown his way.
When we see that everything that's being done in Punch's honor, the tributes that have followed, Patrick, what do you think Punch would say if he saw everything being done in his honor today?
Like I said earlier, it's how tragic is it that 2 days after this press conference, we lose him. Again, it would have been even worse if it had happened before, but there was a glint in his eye, and I wasn't the only one to acknowledge that he kind of had this look. He had this smile on his face, and he's been going through a lot, I know, with his health lately, but there was a sense of acknowledgement that things were going his way. So I think to him, it would have meant the world. It would have meant the world. I mean, those things that he accomplished on the ice with his teams, that was what, almost 50 years ago. It'll be 50-year celebration coming up next summer of that team. So for that to lie dormant, that acknowledgement to lie dormant after all this time, and all of a sudden, boom, 50 years later, he gets acknowledged. You could tell by the little twinkle in his eye, he was appreciative, he was really happy. And I think there was a sense of accomplishment for us. We know what he accomplished, but Ernie, to actually be acknowledged like that, I think it was something really special that he kind of realized was going on in his honor, and I think he really, really appreciated it. I have to, give full kudos to my foundation members who are helping me. When I first started this, I was on my own. I was trying to do this on my own, and everyone told me that I had bitten off a little bit more than I can chew. But now, when people started seeing it develop the way it is and getting, gathering more steam. Again, I'd just like to thank the foundation because they've really helped me out a lot.
Years from now, when someone walks by the eventual statue that's going to be built in Punch's honor, or they simply hear the name Ernie Punch McLean, what do you hope that people remember?
I think what they'll remember, the hockey exploits will be one thing. I mean, I don't think what Ernie did with his junior teams will ever be matched. You know, the 4 consecutive President's Trophies, 2 Memorial Cups, I believe 4 Memorial Cup appearances in a row, winning 2 of them. I don't think that'll be matched. I mean, that's one aspect of it professionally in a sports sense. But just the legendary character he was. I mean, we live in such a, excuse my an expression, but a politically correct society where you could never get away with the the things that Ernie did. It was a different time, a different generation, so that will be talked about. I mean, I can't imagine a little 10-year-old Johnny being told, "Yeah, this guy pulled a wig off the referee, threw a garbage can on the ice, and came on the ice and tried to attack a player." I'd be saying, "No, really, mommy, daddy." So I think the hockey exploits will live on forever, But just his character, his personality. Again, it's just beyond the scope that a lot of people could understand in the future. It was so far removed from today's generation.
Patrick, if you had one final message directly to Punch, what would you say?
It's a tough one. I'd say, Ernie, guess what? That statue's getting done, bud. You always use the word bud, but that statue's coming. And thank you for inspiring me to do this. Sometimes you want to take on something that's a little bit bigger than you. And this is, like I said, I think I'd say to Ernie, we got this. We got this. We got you. We got the statue. Thank you. And you'll never be forgotten because of the statue. But thank you for giving me the inspiration to do this.
Patrick, I appreciate your time sitting down with me here today, remembering the life and legacy of someone who meant so much to the sport of hockey, the community of BC, New West, and I know how much he meant as a friend to yourself. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That is Patrick Singh, the founder of the Ernie Punch McLean Legacy Foundation. Stay tuned. We'll be back more regularly, I promise, with more episodes of the HarPodcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and we'll catch you on the next one.